on computer. Okay. I heard something that made me think. I had to go home this morning. I was starting to set up and I realized I left all my class notes and stuff like that at home. Never done that before. And I thought, well, I could wing it. But anyway, so I went home. So that put me behind. But I did get to hear somebody talking about something. And has nothing to do with anything it did to what he was saying, but I thought his thought was good. He was saying he wondered how many times Seth, the extra son that Adam and Eve had after Cain and Abel were gone. So he just wondered how many times Seth walked in on his parents arguing over who ate the apple and got everything all messed up. Well, no, I bring that up because, the people in the Bible are real people. And they probably didn't do things too much differently than we always think, well, if they're in the Bible, they sit quiet and they have little halos or they have horns, one of the two. But, they probably went through life the same way we did. And part of his point was that we always try to blame other people. But if we were there, we would have probably done the same thing as Adam and Eve. So that was one thing. And another thing, last week, and I just want to spend 2 minutes on this. Last week, we got onto the subject of hell, because and I let it get in, but because when we were talking about John 3:16, and said have eternal life, shall not perish, but have eternal life. And I brought up, what does that word perish mean? And then I've said, this is what we got into it, is I said, because people use terms like that to say, well, hell's not eternal. It's not forever, because perish means like you're done, you're done with life. And I think Clara said, well, where did they get that from? And I said, well, there are passages that they do get it from. Okay. So here's what I do. And I'll do this so that you know that I do check things out. I have this book on hell. Okay. Now, this is just a regular book. What I do when I go to study something is I've got this on PDF. I print it out, and then I go up to Staples and I have them do the spiral binding. So then I can use the book as a workbook. It's got big margins, and instead of, you take a little book, a regular book, and you try to open it, it's always trying to close. You want to study more. But here's the thing, there's 3 views. I just want to go over these just so that you'll know. There's the traditional view, which is the view that most of us hold, is that hell is forever. Once you go to hell, it's that eternal and everlasting, like we see in Matthew 25. And it's kind of based on the fact that the soul created immortal? And if the soul's immortal, the soul can't be extinguished. Therefore, you go to hell forever. Others take a conditionalism view. It's called annihilationism. Is you go to hell, and after you've spent your time in hell, whatever time you get sentenced for the crimes that you did against God, at the end of that, you're just annihilated. Poof, gone. Okay. And then the third view is restorationism. A lot of you may know as universalism, that in the end, everybody goes to heaven. You may have to go to hell for a while, and then, but in the end, maybe for 100 million years, who knows? But in the end, everybody, ends up in heaven. So for the annihilation one, if you think of Romans 6, where is it? It was 23. The wages of sin is death. So to them, that's the annihilationism. If you're not going to go to heaven, the wages for your sin is that you die. Poof, you're gone, you're out of existence. The one for the restorationism actually comes from one of my favorite verses in 2 Corinthians 5, where it says, this is after, hey, behold, all things have become new. And 5:17, and then 18 to 22, it's talking how God has reconciled all things through Jesus Christ. Here's the thing, not counting their sins against them any longer. So a universalist looks at that and says, well, wait a minute. He's not holding them accountable for their sins. The death of Jesus, covered that. Yeah. So, yeah, I know it's uncomfortable territory, like that. But, but the thing is that people do have reasons for coming up with, it's a difficult subject, because can go all ways. Rick.
How do you stand purgatory?
Well, purgatory is a Roman Catholic, it's a Roman Catholic thing. Now, a lot of people don't know this. In Roman Catholic theology, when someone goes, you go to heaven, you go to hell, or you go to purgatory. Everybody that goes to purgatory will eventually end up in heaven. And that's kind of the universalist, view. Well, except for, no, I take it back, because there are people that go to hell, okay? They go to hell. The people that go to purgatory, they're not going to go to hell, but after their sin has properly been purged, they're going to go to heaven.
Is there a Bible verse that indicates that?
A purgatory?
Yes.
No. Well, I take it back. There's a verse in one of the Maccabees in the Apocrypha, first or second Maccabees, that they look at. There's a verse I want to say in the Psalms that they allude to. People infer from writings. I mean, and they may be right, because the Bible isn't explicit on all these, on all these things. So I will get you that information. You don't have the Apocrypha, we don't have the Apocrypha in our Bibles, like that. So, but if anybody ever wants to read this stuff, I gave Howard yesterday, on Friday in Masters Men, we talked about the Book of Enoch, and so Howard called me yesterday and he said, how do I get a hold of this Book of Enoch? You think they have it at the library? And I said, I have it on my computer. I mean, I have about 3,000 books in PDF form like this, in PDF form. And so I sent it to him, I emailed it to him, like that. So now he'll probably walk in all dazed and confused, because it is a strange book. But the idea is all these things. So Claire, I'll get you the information on that, from that passage from Maccabees on purgatory. Or, well, I shouldn't say, because it doesn't say purgatory in the passage, but what it says leads them to believe that there's a time of purging people before they go back up to heaven. Okay. Anyway, I didn't want to get too deep into this, but I wanted to, I don't even know if any of you remember the conversation from last week. And I'll look into it more.
Well, I'm looking at verse 46, and these will go away into an eternal punishment.
Correct. Right, and that's in Matthew 2:25. Correct.
I wouldn't say just that.
Well, because like, no. Well, purgatory part. Well, I'll show it to you. I mean, I'll show you what they use. I'm not saying what they use is right. I'll just show you what they use. Okay. But it's like what I said with the annihilationism in the Romans 6:23, where it says the wages of sin is death. They take it as being death and proof you're gone. I got it. So it's not that easy. People hold different views. The main point is we can hold to the view that we want, and know that there's probably some backing to it. I hold to the traditional view, just like all of you do, that you're going to hell forever. Well, we're going to heaven forever. Those other people are going to hell forever. So pastor's not too confused, because he wasn't here this week. Something came up and we got into hell. And I said, there's three views of hell. One is that you go eternally, to hell. One's that you go for a while and then you get annihilated. And then you have the universalist view that after some time in hell, everybody goes to heaven. But I wanted to clarify. I just took a couple of minutes to clarify. Dave. Do your microphone.
My understanding of purgatory, growing up, is if you ended up in purgatory, there was so many long prayers that your family had to say before you got out of purgatory.
Well, that's a way, well, no, but that's a way that they could get you out early. So if God says to you, Dave, you know, you weren't bad enough for hell, but you got some stuff you got to work out.
Yeah.
Now you got a couple of days off for working as an usher today, so. Well, but that's kind of the way it works. But in the meantime, Diane may say, well, you know, he does deserve that time there, but I will say some prayers and I'll give some extra money. You know, that's what the building of St. Peter's Basilica was all about. And that Luther argued with Tetzel about collecting money to build the cathedral in Rome was because he tied it to, if you give money, your relatives will get out of purgatory early. You know, like that.
It's a real money maker.
Yeah,
Big
yeah.
today.
Oh, right. Well, no, right.
It
No,
was.
it is. No, it is. Were you gonna say something else?
Yeah. We have, I think it's in our library here, the Apocrypha, and having all those books in it. But also I've got an old Catholic Bible that's got them in also.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, Catholic Bibles, if you have an old Catholic Bible, between the Old Testament and New Testament, they've got the Apocrypha, you know, and there's like 12, 13 books that are in there that are just, they're not canonical, but the Luther translated them. You know, in fact, CPH puts out, it looks just like the study Bible, you know, like the Lutheran study Bible, it's the Burgundy, but it's of the Apocrypha with study notes and all that.
He says it's not biblical.
You can get stuff out, and that's why I was saying Friday when we had the Enoch passage in Tobit, where they list the 7 angels by name. Don't know. Anyway, so I wanna move on. If you can think of questions, call me or email me or whatever. Or if you think you need a certain book, I'll find it in my library somewhere. Anyway, Andy.
Isn't the Apocrypha a time filler between the Old Testament and the New Testament? It's a period of time.
That's 400.
Well, no, yeah, well, it's stuff that could have happened then or did happen then.
We
But
accept
the
that.
Eastern Orthodox, they've got the Apocrypha interspersed throughout, you know, like in Esther, there's 2 extra chapters in Esther, you know, that are from Judith or one of those books. Okay, Ray, and then we got to stop on this. I want to get to the study because I ran all the way home to get it this morning.
And second, he's 12:39-45.
Okay. Well, you did it. Why don't you read it? Read it loud so everybody can hear. Let me just say before he starts, this is where the Roman Catholic Church looks into Maccabees and somehow they come up with purgatory. Go ahead.
The Roman Catholic doctrine of purgatory teaches that people who die while in God's grace, but who are not sufficiently purified of their sinfulness to enter God's presence must undergo a time of purification through temporary suffering in the torments of purgatory. Unlike hell, purgatory is not a final judgment on the wicked, but rather a finite period of purging for the insufficiently righteous. In the place where one suffers
Right.
for one's own remaining sins before entering into heavenly
I
blessing.
thought you were going to read the passage.
Oh, no.
Oh, you just had a okay. Okay, I'll get that. Okay. So here's the thing. Here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a thing on, you know, why didn't John write a birth account of Jesus? You know, we're sitting right now between Christmas and Easter, so, you know, we could, we can do that. You know, we all know that Matthew had a birth account, okay? In Matthew 1:1, it says the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And you go down to verse 18, and it says, now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. And then he goes on with, his story. And then Luke wrote a birth account, and he said in Luke 2, in the first verse, said, in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. So he put it in a historical time frame. And a couple of verses later, he says, and while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in the manger because there was no place for them at the inn. So Luke has his birth account. Mark didn't write a birth account. You know, Mark was in such a hurry to write his gospel. I think he just didn't have time for it because he started out the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. You know, and in those first 12 verses of chapter 1, he's got John baptizing in the wilderness, Jesus getting baptized, Jesus going through his temptation in the wilderness, you know, all in 12 verses. I mean, he's just racing through. But John didn't write a birth account. He went way before Jesus' birth. You know, in John chapter 1 where he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made. So, but why didn't he have a birth account? You know, here's the thing is that he could have, he probably had the best reason to write a birth account. He probably had the most information, you know? And so it's odd. Why would you think, anybody have any ideas why he would have the best information to write a birth account?
Was he just establishing the value?
What's that?
Was he just establishing the value of Jesus?
I
By
don't know.
saying those things?
By saying what he said in verse 1? He's showing that Jesus is God, you know, like that.
But that establishes what he's worth.
Right.
He is God.
But I think that he had, you know, Luke says in his gospel that he interviewed a lot of people. You know, I checked all this stuff out, you know, so but I think John had a closer source of the information. You know, when Jesus was on the cross, he said, when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. You know, I never gave thought to that before about disciples having their own home. You know, I thought they all lived with, you know, the foxes have no hole and, you know, this kind of stuff, you know, but John and James, they were big time fishermen. They probably had the big house in town. You know, they probably did, you know, when you think about it, I never gave it any thought before. But anyway, John took Mary to live with him. Who better to talk to? And I'm sure they talked to him. I'm sure that John said, tell me about Jesus. Tell me about Jesus. Tell me about the birth. Tell me about when those angels came or the shepherds came or whoever came. And Mary goes, you know, let me bring out the scrapbook. Well, we don't know. No, but I mean, you would think he has all the information to write a Christmas story. And yet he didn't.
Maybe he thought it wasn't relevant to what he was trying to get across, to what his book was going to be about.
What I'm going to show you is that we do have Jesus's birth account in John's gospel. Let's see, most people don't know that, do they? Okay. So anyway, so he probably had these conversations with her. You know, even today, historians look and they try to figure out what did Jesus do when he was younger. And they write books about it. How much do the Gospels say about Jesus when after he was in the temple with Simeon and Anna at his presentation, and when he started his public ministry when he was, you know, 30 or whatever? How much does it say? Well, it did. It's,
12 years old.
when he was 12 years old, it was at the temple. And that's all that it says. You know, but people write books. I even asked on AI, artificial intelligence, I said, give me the top 10 books about Jesus when he was young. Got one here called The Childhood of Jesus and Jesus of Nazareth, The Infancy Narratives by Joseph Ratzinger. Who knows who Joseph Ratzinger is? You guys want to make very good Catholics. Pope Benedict. Pope Benedict has written, and I've got them if you want them, has written probably the best, I want to say biographies, best books on the life of Jesus. He's got 3 volumes that he wrote. The guy was a genius. You know, we don't think much about popes and stuff like that, but he was like a great historian with the Catholic Church. He was the head of their doctrine. You know, this is before he was Pope. You know, he was head of their doctrine committee or whatever they called it. But anyway, but he's got these books on the childhood of Jesus. Now, unless they're 3 pages, I don't know. But I'll have to get. I have 3 of his books. Maybe this is one of them. I don't know. But anyway, so he's got that. You know, we got The Lost Years of Jesus, documentary evidence of Jesus's 17-year journey in the East by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Now, she's one of these new age gurus, crazy ladies, but I bet people bought her book. You know, I bet she sold plenty of them, because who doesn't want to know what Jesus was doing in those silent years? Man. We've got The Childhood of Jesus, a novel, The Hidden Life, pardon? Oh, I thought somebody said that. Anyway, The Hidden Life of Jesus, The Lost Years of Jesus, Revealing the Hidden Years. That's another one by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. The Boy Who Met Jesus. Anyway, you got all these books. And here John could have cleared it all up. I mean, I'm guessing that he could have cleared it all up. But for some reason, he didn't want that interfering with his story. Okay? Because what we're going to see is that Jesus is going to tell us his birth account himself. Okay? So this will be red letter Christmas story. Yeah. So look at John 18. Turn in your Bibles to John 18. This is a confrontation between Pontius Pilate and Jesus. This is where I'm tying this into Holy Week. So I'm trying to tie in Christmas and Holy Week here. Pardon? 18. I don't know, what is it, 23 or something? 28. Okay, but before that, listen up. Huh? Listen up. Okay, so, you know, what we have is that the Pharisees had Jesus first, the high priest. You know, if you remember the story, they wanted him arrested. They arrested him outside the garden. They paid off Judas, you know, and then they brought him around, and they took him around to at night when they weren't supposed to do it. They took him around to several different trials, you know, the Jewish leaders. Okay. And they did what they thought was sufficient. And then they're going to bring him to Pilate. Okay. But in Mark chapter 10, Jesus had predicted this. He said, see, we're going to go up to Jerusalem. He's talking to his disciples, and they're not in Jerusalem. He says, see, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And that's what we're going to see in John chapter 18, is exactly what Jesus had predicted was going to take place. So, but remember, you have to remember this part. he's going to say that the Jews are going to condemn him to death. Okay? A lot of people say, well, you know, he was a rebel. The Romans didn't like him, and that's why they executed him. You know, like that. I'm going to show you that the Romans don't even know who he is. You know. Yeah. So anyway, so we get into 18 verses 28. And he says, then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas. So this is the Jews leading him, okay? From the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, what accusations do you bring against this man? They answered him, if this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you. Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. The Jews said to him, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die, which would be that Mark passage, you know, that we read earlier. Now you got to understand with the Jews there, I mean, their hypocrisy. One, they've been doing trials. You're not supposed to do trials after sunset. Here they're doing trials all night long with Jesus, taking him back and forth to different places. Then they won't even enter the governor's mansion or headquarters, it says there, because they don't want to be defiled, because they want to make sure that they're clean to be able to participate in the Passover. You know? And then, even though they have condemned them to death, they go, oh, well, you know, we're not allowed to kill people. You know, we can push them off the train deck, but we don't kill them. The train kills them when it comes through. You know, that kind of thing. So anyway, so what they're doing, but notice what Pilate's thing was. He said, he says, what accusations do you bring against this man? I mean, he's got no idea what's happening here. Okay. So this is the setup. You know, again, they have all the false, the false holiness, and they just want to dump them on Pilate because they know that Pilate will do their dirty work. So then we go to the next part there in verse 33. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, and this is a famous conversation. I'm sure you're all familiar. He says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it about me?" You think that Pilate's in charge here. I mean, Pilate has all the power in the world. At least he has all the power in Jerusalem, like that. But Jesus is saying, tell me your authority to ask the question.
That's hearsay.
Pardon?
That's hearsay.
That's what?
Hearsay.
Hearsay. No, but he's saying, what's your authority? He's placing himself on equal authority, with Pilate. They think this would be enough to get Pilate mad, so he'd want to execute him. He says, "Did you say this of your own accord, or did others say it about me?" So Pilate's asking, "Are you a king?" And Jesus asks about Pilate's authority, and he's on that level. So in verse 35, Pilate answered. He says, Pilate answered him and said, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me." So he's going, "I'm not a Jew. How am I supposed to know if you're a king or not?" He goes, "I don't know those things." But here's the key. After that, he says, "What have you done?" That's a key verse there. I mean, that means, we think that the acts of Jesus for those 3 years were so notorious, so known, that he had the whole country up in arms over, and Pilate here doesn't even know him. You know, I mean, and that's not Pilate's fault, because Jesus was there to irritate the Jews. I don't know if that's a theological word or not, you know, but he was there to challenge the Jews. He was first sent to the lost sheep of Israel. And part of that being there for the lost sheep of Israel is to deliver the law to them before you can give them the good news of the gospel. And so those who followed Jesus probably got that gospel message. The leaders, they didn't hang around long enough for the gospel message. They just knew anytime Jesus opened his mouth in a town, you know, that they were going to kill him, that they were going to do something to him. So Pilate doesn't even know who he is. And Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world." In other words, he's saying, look, I wouldn't be standing here before you like a lamb to slaughter. So now he's going to ask, so he's kind of asking Pilate, so why am I here? You know, because we know, you know, what did Pilate want to do in the end? Wanted to release him. Yeah, he washed his hands of it, wanted to release him. You know, he even offered Barabbas up. You know, he offered Barabbas up because he knew that Barabbas was so odious to the Jews that they would not want Barabbas released and that they would take Jesus. But no, they said, give us Barabbas. You know, you go take him. So then Pilate said to him, so you are a king. You know, he goes, okay, maybe not the king of the Jews, but you're still a king, right? And then here's the money verse. Okay, this is what we're waiting for. Jesus answered and said, you say that I am a king. Here comes his birth account. He says, for this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. He tells the very reason that he was born and came to, and if you got a red letter edition, it should be in red letters there. That makes it the truth. It's not the truth until you see it in the red letters with Jesus. Okay. But there you got Jesus giving his own birth account right there. So John didn't need to, didn't need to do it. You know, this is John's Christmas story. Took until the middle of Holy Week to get him there. Okay. Jesus was born, but it's not his beginning. Jesus has no beginning. He's from all eternity, you know, in the past. But his birth was his coming from God into the world. So which one's the more accurate birth account if you're talking about coming on the scene? You know?
Mouth.
Yeah, it's out of his mouth. Christmas minus the cross. This is what, and I said this, I don't know if I said it in this class or at Masters Men. You know, to me, in Holy Week, Good Friday is the day. Okay? Because Good Friday is the day that all the work was done. Everything led up to, you know, Good Friday and that. Now, that doesn't mean that you can separate the events. You know, you take, you know, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, even Holy Saturday and Easter, and they're like one event, you know, like that. But that work was done at the crucifixion. So that's what Jesus is telling Pilate, you know, is for this reason, standing before you. That's the reason I'm here. You know, like that. And what did and so he said, he's talking about truth, and then Pilate said to him, what is truth? You know, and so I mean, it's, you know, Pilate's kind of lost in all this too. I'm not saying Pilate was a nice guy. You know, I mean, because Pilate could have just released him on his own. But defeats the purpose there. You know, because the purpose was to get Jesus, to get Jesus on the cross. Any question? Make sense? That's why I didn't have the class notes. I didn't have a way to break this down into notes because it's right into the, it's right into the text, but it's something we probably all skip over because it's so familiar to us. Because this is something that we do every Holy Week. Somewhere along the line, this story comes up. So we become so familiar with it, it just kind of, blurs over. So next time you hear it, hopefully you go, yeah, that is important. That conversation with Pilate, was important. Any questions? I mean, oh, come on, I'll give a test. Ray.
Maybe, just I'm a little bit confused as far as the Jews not being able to kill somebody, but didn't they kill Stephen?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've never really looked into to find out what rule or law they refer to when they say we weren't allowed to kill. I mean, it's not a biblical law.
Or they're not allowed to crucify somebody like the Romans.
Well, I mean, so they could have taken them out and had a firing squad with slingshots, they could have done that. I'll have to look into, because I've never looked into, I mean, because everybody always says, when they were under Roman rule, Roman law said that the locals couldn't carry out their own executions. Now that may have been throughout the whole Roman Empire, or, I don't know how many, Rome was the most powerful empire. But the way that they held on to their empire wasn't by force. I mean, there was force involved, but it wasn't by force. It was, pardon?
Fear.
Well, no, it was by peace, that they kept the peace. I mean, they may have kept the peace out of violence, but they kept the peace. They didn't care if you had your own religion. Yeah, go be a Jew, go be a Christian, go be a this or that. But they kept the peace. And by keeping the peace, they didn't have people wanting to overthrow them. So
Why?
why?
Fear.
No, well, no, I mean, but that wasn't their threat. That's what I'm saying. That wasn't their threat. They come in, they make peace, and
It's an implied threat.
huh?
Implied.
I don't know.
It was right in the back of their mind.
It may be, but what I'm saying is they made a good life for the people in the Roman Empire. I mean, probably the what's his name? Alexander the Great before Rome probably had more violence, that went on. Oh, Denny.
This comment, at least for now, it's David Wilson's exactly what we've been talking about, John. But they did explain why Jesus answered Pilate the way he did. He said, "Why do you ask me? Talk to the people that I've been preaching to and so forth." Because it was the Romans, it's their practice to talk to the witnesses, not the accused.
No. Yeah, well, and that could be, but by the same token, he could have told the Jews, "Come on in here. I want to talk to you guys. I don't care whether you do Passover or not." But it sounds like, and we'll just finish with it. It just sounds like Jesus wanted to be right there in front of Pilate. All the other stuff was stuff that led up to it or that got him there. The Jewish leaders having him in chains probably, and probably lifting him up off the ground to make sure that he made it to into Pilate's palace. just be like the same effect of having taken a cab to go see Pilate. It was all that other stuff that happened was just that mode of transport to get him in front of Pilate. So. Okay, if that's it, then we'll end with that. That'd be a good Friday passage to, Dave.
Use it's like,
Well, the Jewish people were kind of about him. They liked him when he fed them. You know, you liked him when he healed them. They liked him when he fed them. The leaders didn't like him because now Jesus was challenging their authority to be leaders because they weren't doing it the way that it was supposed to be done. Okay. So the people, like I say, the people were kind of, people were kind of wishy-washy. I mean, like I said, when he fed them, they liked him. And good example is when he fed the 5,000, they loved him. In fact, when he crossed the lake and they ran around the lake to be on the other side when he got there, because they thought this is like the food truck coming, But then when he gave them the talk about, I am the bread of life, and he who eats me, however that conversation goes in John chapter 6, and they all left him. Wait. We'll take the submarine sandwiches, but we don't want to lecture. We don't want you telling us how we have to think and live and all that. So, but the Jewish people, it was kind of like what do you see? We're going to have Palm Sunday next week when they're doing the hosannas and stuff like that. And then later in the week, when they're going crucify him, whether they're the exact same people, we don't know, but they're going crucify him, just kind of fickle the way that, yeah. But if you read the accounts, if you read in the Gospels, every time Jesus confronts the Pharisees, scribes, Sadducees, whoever it is, they always get together and they try to find a way to kill him, or to get rid of him, or do whatever it is. Every time, and they tried to figure, however the wording goes, they tried to kill him like that. So that's what I got.
They did the same thing with the apostles. They were trying to kill the apostles. They were trying to kill God, Jesus raised from the dead.
Lazarus.
Yeah, Lazarus. Yes, that's a funny thing. So Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. This is right before the Palm Sunday, the entry into Jerusalem, and the people are ready to do the hosannas because he raised Lazarus from the dead. But the Jewish leaders are going, we want to kill him and we want to kill Lazarus. Yeah, so there's a history between those.
Kill them.
Kill them.
Get rid of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Do away with the competition.
Yeah. You know what? See, here's the thing. Here's the thing, and we'll end with this. Is on the Pharisees side, they only saw what was happening to them in their town. On Jesus's side, he's looking at his death as being the solution to all problems. So we got that spiritual side, the physical. The pastor can expound on that more during Holy Week services and Easter. He can clear up my mess. Okay, I'm going to turn out